Well, I've recently returned from Europe. I taught in Iceland, the UK, and in Bregenz, Austria. And I saw some things in Bregenz, Austria that I wanted to share with you and see if maybe any of you have any experience with this or get your thoughts on it. I saw a demonstration of mesmerism. And just as a little background for those of you who may not be fully versed in mesmerism, most hypnotists think that mesmerism was sort of like the forerunner of hypnosis, of hypnotism. And it's attributed to Franz Anton Mesmer, a German physician who during the mid to late 1700s up until the early 1800s used, here is his theory. In his theory, there's a magnetic force or an energy that flows throughout the universe, and he thought it was controlled by the planets, and it runs through everything, including human beings. And so in his model, sometimes people would get ill either physically or mentally because the energy or magnetism within their body was blocked up, wasn't flowing properly. So by using his hands to do passes over the patient's body, from head down to the pit of the stomach, he could straighten out their magnetism or energy, and they would get well. And a lot of them did. So one of the things that I've done quite a bit of reading about mesmerism over the years, and especially recently after I saw this demonstration. And there's something they talk about called a crisis. So when the mesmerist is making these passes over the patient's body, sometimes this energy just kind of wells up and the person goes into what they call the crisis. And it can be quite violent physically. And, sometimes it's just crying, sometimes it's just twitching, and sometimes it's just, almost like a fit or a, what is the word I'm looking for? Or like a seizure. And so Mesmer used to have a crisis room. And it's a room set aside where they could put the patients that were in crisis, put them in there, and it was padded, and so they wouldn't hurt themselves as this crisis, expressed itself. Okay, so I'd read about this. And so Mesmer's theories were sort of debunked by a very famous medical scientific committee. Some of the members of it were Benjamin Franklin, Dr. Guillotine, who invented that famous haircut machine, and some of the greatest scientific minds of their time. They debunked mesmerism and said it's just suggestion, which, okay, so I accept that. That was what I accepted too. But I did consider that mesmerism was a forerunner of hypnosis. Okay, so when I was teaching in Austria with my friend Nicole Wackernagel of the Swiss Hypnosis Institute, we co-taught a course there in Austria, and she arranged for a mesmerist to come in during the last, say, 90 minutes of the class to talk a little bit about what he did. And I thought that might be interesting, so, I stayed for it. And so he began with a demonstration, and he took 3 highly hypnotizable people and, of course, began to do his passes and stare into their eyes. And, of course, they reacted very, very well to it. But I thought, well, anything can be an induction, and these are highly hypnotizable people, so I didn't see anything that really impressed me. And then one of the students there, who was not a highly hypnotizable type, asked him, well, what about somebody who's not highly hypnotizable? And he said, oh, yeah, it works on them too. Come on up. and she did, and it didn't work with her. And he began making his passes and staring into her eyes, and she just wasn't reacting to it. And I saw her left hand kind of twitch a couple of times, and I'm not sure she could have been actively resisting him. I'm not sure, but at any rate, it didn't work on her, and he worked on her for about 5 or 6 minutes. So I felt kind of bad for him because that was the end of his demonstration and it ended in a failure. And so, okay, I felt kind of bad for him. But anyway, so the next day, my friend Nicole had arranged for the mesmerist to come in again with just a small group of the four of us, the two ladies from the Swiss Hypnosis Institute, and my wife Stephanie, and me. And he told us how he does mesmerism. And it was very, very interesting. Um, and we took a break during lunch. And when he came back, he said he had met one of the students from the class that we had just taught the past 2 days. And he had invited him back because he had a very serious problem and he wanted to see if the mesmerism might help him. Now, this student, I actually worked with him during the class myself, and he was not highly hypnotizable. And he just wasn't highly hypnotizable, which is fine. So I didn't really have high hopes for how this demonstration was going to go. But what I saw was, that's why I'm doing this video, because it was crazy. He sat the fellow down in the chair, and he began doing his passes from the top of the guy's head over his shoulders and then down, and again and again and again and again. He did this for, I don't know, a minute or two. And then he asked him, how do you feel? And he said, schwer, heavy. I feel heavy. And he said, okay, good. Come on, stand up. And he stood him up, and then he began making the passes from the top of the guy's head all the way down to about his waist, and again and again and again. And I wasn't seeing anything happening. And then I looked over at my friend Nicole, and she was kind of wide-eyed, and she was pointing. "Do you see this?" And I looked, and the fellow began to go from side to side. And the mesmerist he held his hand up about, I don't know, about midsection on the guy, and he was moving with him. Now, in my mind, I thought, well, okay, he's going side to side and you're moving your hand side to side. Okay, I can do that too. That's something. But then he started moving even more, and the mesmerist moved his hand more, and this fellow began to move more and more, back and forth and back, side to side. I mean, just yeah, yeah, just side to side like this, but really, really far to the side. That was kind of crazy. And I thought, well, okay, I'm starting to be impressed here. Um, so 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 he's swaying, and then the mesmerist started moving his hand a little differently, like sort of in a circular motion, and the fellow began to move his body in a circular motion with sort of, if you imagine the head pretty much staying in the right place, in the same place, and the feet staying in the right place, but the midsection was going in a circle around and around and around, and it was it was profound. I thought he's gonna fall. It was really, it looked very, very odd. And then the fellow leaned all the way back, and I've seen, I don't know if they're woodcuts or I don't know what they are, but I've seen artwork of somebody mesmerizing people, and you see the person swooning backward. Their head back. It's almost, they turn into a U shape as their head goes back, and they stay standing, but their head goes back. Their whole body arches back, and he was doing that. He was leaning all the way back like that, and I thought, this is just absolutely crazy. And then he came forward, and his face was beet red, and he roared. I mean, he roared, and then he leaned back again, and then he came forward and roared, and it was. I thought, he's going to have a stroke or something. This is crazy, or a heart attack. And this guy is I don't know, about mid 40s or something like that. Not a fit man. If I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, kind of chubby, and he's leaning all the way back, and he's coming forward with his face just beet red and just roaring. And I thought, it almost looks like an exorcism. This is so crazy. And then uh, and his eyes were sort of half open, but it was as if he wasn't seeing anything, and he just did this roaring noise. It was kind of scary. So then, he began jumping, and I mean jumping up and down. I mean getting some great air, and like I say, this is not a fit man. He's kind of chubby. He's very chubby, and he's jumping, jumping up and down and up and down, and so I jumped up from my chair, and Nicole jumped up from her chair, and we stood on different sides of him just in case he was going toward the window or something, because I thought he was either going to fall or he was going to go through the window. It was a violent sort of reaction, jumping up and down and up and down. It's crazy. And then finally, the jumping slowed a bit, and the mesmerist took him from behind and laid him back on the floor, laid him on the floor for his safety and on his back. And he continued to twitch and move his arms and everything. And oh, that was the other thing I missed. Before he started jumping, he started shaking his hand so fast that it looked as though his hand was going to just come off of his wrist. He was shaking his both arms so quickly. It was really frightening. I've never seen anything like it in my life. So anyway, he laid there for a while, and the mesmerist worked on and did the passes and that sort of thing, and moved his magnetic field or his energy around a little bit more, and he continued to twitch and stuff, and then it finally passed. And I mean, this looked like some kind of a seizure. It was that violent. And finally, he opened his eyes, and he was all sweaty from all the activity, and he just opened his eyes and said, "What happened?" And that was it. And so the mesmerist checked with him. "How are you feeling?" He said, "I feel better. I feel good." And I understand through follow up, the guy, it was a very serious problem. I'm not going to get into it, but I mean, this fellow was like, he was in my class for 2 days, and I'd say, mid 40s, overweight, conservative, almost a little bit, I'd say, toward the introvert. I mean, this is crazy to see this kind of reaction from this man. Nice fella, but I did not expect this. It was crazy. So anyway, so finally he got himself together and left the room, and I just buried my head in my hands and said, "Well, I won't tell you what I said, but it was crazy. I've never seen anything like that in my life." Now, one of the things I want to mention is that this fellow who the mesmerist treated, his only exposure to mesmerism was the quick demonstration at the end of our class. He had no knowledge of mesmerism. He didn't know what crisis was. I thought I knew, but I did not know what crisis was. And I talked with the mesmerist afterwards for the rest of the day, and then the next day spent the day with him talking about this. And he said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as how energetic the crises are, he said that was about an 8. I also saw a video of one of the other students who was a bit more highly hypnotizable, but not necessarily somnambulist. His work with her, and she also went through a crisis, which was probably like a 5 or something like that. It was still very profound and energetic, but not like this fella did. So anyway, so there you go. I'm wondering if any of my readers out there or viewers have ever experienced anything like this. And if you have, I'd love to talk with you and get your experience. I was amazed. I was, man. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to Switzerland in March, and I'm going to take this fellow's class because I want to find out as much as I can about it. I'm not giving up hypnosis, but I need to find more, just as a matter of knowing my background in hypnosis. I need to know more about this. But yeah, it was, I've never seen anything like it in my life, and it was really impressive. So, like I say, if you have any experience with this and you care to share with me, I'd love to know, what you've experienced. One more thing I'll say before I end this video is that I talked extensively with this mesmerist about his model. And of course, our hypnosis model is that in general, with serious problems, something happens to you in your earlier life, usually when you're a child, and it causes trauma, and then this trauma manifests itself later on in your life and causes issues for you. Maybe you could binge eat because of something that happened when you were a child. Maybe you were something simple where you were deprived of food or something like that. And now, as an adult, this trauma or this imprint has been made on your psyche, and of course, you feel like you have to binge because you had this trauma of not having food. So that's kind of our model. But in the mesmerist model, something happens to you earlier on and it causes an imprint. Okay, same thing, right? But in the mesmerist model, that imprint is on your physical body, in your physical body. And then by manipulating this energy or magnetic field within your body, uh, the the issue the trauma kind of expresses itself, sometimes in the form of a very energetic crisis. And when that's expressed itself, then you're fine and the problem goes away. So it's a different model from what we follow, because we got the same imprint, right? But then we find out what caused the imprint, and then we talk it through, do our hypnotherapy, and then that fixes the problem. So it's a different model. So anyway, please let me know what you thought or what you know, and I'd love to talk about this. All right, thank you.